Hi there again. And I am together with Dorothy Harvey. Hello, Dorothy. How are you doing?
Fine. How are you, Andreas?
I'm...
Thank you for inviting me to this. It's always very exciting to talk with you.
Is it really?
We can't stop. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, today I've just thought a good topic and a very, very interesting one would be how to change instruments. As we know, you have been a French horn player for, I think, more than 30 years. And then you retired.
Yeah.
And then you couldn't stop. And then you picked up another...
I couldn't stop the music.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but what you should know is that I've been connected with music since I was a child. So at 7 years old, because I used to come home and play all these tunes from school on the piano, which is what a lot of kids do, you know? The ear is developed. And I wanted to play the piano, and my father said, we have to wait because once you start, you have to practice. And of course, I didn't have any idea what that entails. But so, okay, he waited until I was 7. And at 5, I used to do all this. So at 7, I started piano with my father, who was a former cathedral organist, and also he did a lot of concert playing as a pianist. So, okay, and that went on for years, and I did a lot of accompanying in high school. I wanted to major in piano. I picked up the horn when I was 11, and actually I wanted to play the alto horn. I don't know if I've ever told you this.
I don't think
the alto horn I inherited from my grandfather, who used to play the French horn and the alto horn. And as my father tells me, when I was 2 years old, I used to drag the alto horn, which was underneath the piano, the grand piano in the house in Hackensack, New Jersey. I used to drag it around the house. Of course, I don't remember this. And it was probably bigger than me. So his wish was, when I got older, just one summer, take this alto horn to the school director and ask him if you can learn the fingerings and play it a little bit, you know. So I went out and bought a mouthpiece. I guess I was 11 years old. Went out and bought a mouthpiece, and I figured out some of the fingerings. I didn't know anything about brass instruments. The alto horn is a miniature tuba, okay? The tuba is the papa, and then you have the baritone horn, which is similar, and you have an alto horn, and then I guess you'd have to take the trumpet, because that's this next smaller. So anyway, so the horn was in terrible shape. I had inherited it from my grandfather. It was built in 1869, and it was silver plated, and all the silver was off, and I couldn't get much of a sound out of it. And my band director played a couple notes. He said, well, you can play it, but it has to be overhauled first. So he sent it off to be overhauled, and he said, if you'd like to, you could pick another instrument for the summertime, and I would teach you. And just by coincidence, 2 French hornists from New York City had just played a concert in my school, okay? And the man was a former solo horn of the Cincinnati Symphony, and his wife was doing some freelancing in New York. So they played duets, and I was so impressed with this curled up instrument that you got this incredible sound with. So I said, yeah, I want to play the French horn. He said, oh, okay. And they just happened to have a horn there because nobody played horn in those days. Horn was difficult. And and he said, okay, you just press your lips together and see if you can make a note. So I just, that's what I did. And he said, okay, you've got the air, so let's try it. So for one summer, I played the horn. And that was it. I was sold on the horn.
Yeah, and you liked the sound, or what made it so interesting?
The only thing important for me on the French horn is the sound. And as far as I'm concerned, there's no more beautiful sound than French horn. And you can take any instrument you want. The French horn has the most beautiful sound. That's my opinion. Okay. And that's a combination of many different things that will attribute the sound of the horn. But anyway, it has a very unique sound. It's similar to a trombone, but different. So anyway, after that summer, I said, no, I want to play the horn. So, and I studied with this band director from school, and then right after that, started working with the band director at the high school, who happened to be a tuba player, a fine tuba player. The mistake was he sat to my right side. I think I've said this before. And he didn't correct my embouchure, the setting of my mouth.
Yeah.
So within a year, my teeth were crooked because I pressed on the front right tooth. And so if anyone were looking now, you'd see my front right tooth is pushed out of place because I played incorrectly. And that got worse over the years.
Okay.
But anyway, so I played the horn then. And then one of this couple, the woman, became my teacher in high school because the man died well, we won't talk about years here, but he died. I was still in high school. He died, so I studied with her for 4 years, and then I told my father I wanted to become a concert pianist because I was really working on the piano, and he said, "No, pianists cost a dime a dozen, so you want to play the French horn because nobody plays the horn. It's difficult." And my grandfather had played it, of course.
Yeah.
So he said, "So why don't you play the horn, and then you can guarantee yourself a job." So that was, I wanted to be in music, and I thought, yeah, he's right. So it was actually my father's decision that I become a hornist. And I don't regret it now. So I went to school and studied the horn. They wouldn't let me take piano lessons because they said, no, you can play everything. And of course, it was rudimentary what I could play, but I could play. I could sight read anything. So that was it. And then I went on and I had a job in a quintet in a school system in New Jersey's entire school system, and played the horn every morning in 10 to 20 classes, and the quintet gave a concert in the afternoon or 2 concerts, and I did that for a year. That was while I was finishing up at Manhattan School of Music, and then I got my master's in education at Manhattan, and then lo and behold, I got a job in the Mobile Symphony in the southern states and worked there for a year. And I didn't like the South and didn't like the heat. So then I got a job in the New Jersey Symphony. So I went back to New Jersey where I was. And that was 2 years. And then I got involved with the solo trombone player. And we decided to go to Europe for a vacation in the summertime. And this went on and on and on. So I worked then later in Stuttgart, came to Europe, worked in Switzerland as the first female hornist, and then in Stuttgart Philharmonic, and then came to Hamburg, and I put behind me 34 years in the Philharmonic State Orchestra, which is the opera orchestra in Hamburg, okay? So I got that behind me, and then your question was, well, yeah, then you're talking about another instrument. So when I hung it up, as the hornists say, I hung it up, I thought, geez, how can I live without music? My last performance was from Wagner, the last opera of the Ring cycle from Wagner, Die Götterdämmerung, okay? And I was, by that time, playing the Wagner tuba, which is it's not a baritone horn. It's a French horn in the same key with a very large bell. And you put it on your lap, just like a baritone horn, but it's not a baritone. It has a different sound than a baritone. It was built by Wagner for his Ring cycle, and Strauss used it, of course, also for his operas. So that was engaging. It was difficult because it's out of tune, like the French horn is, and you can't put your hand in the bell because it's too far up. And when they hold a French horn, you put your hand into the bell and you can correct the tuning.
Yeah.
But you can't do that on a Wagner tuba. So you have to do it with your mouth, and you have an instrument which sometimes has, instead of 3 valves, which is normal, would have a 4th valve, and the 4th valve would be a very long crook, as we call it, which was exactly about the same length as 1 and 3. Is that correct? Yeah. Or it would be 1, 2, and 3, and maybe a little longer. So yeah, the instrument's out of tune. So you can use what you call alternate fingerings. So anyway, so that was how I ended up at the opera the last 7 or 8 years playing the Wagner tuba. And it was exciting, playing in a whole quartet of Wagner tuban. But after that I thought, well, how can I stop playing music? And I hadn't played the piano now in like 40 years. I had a new Yamaha here sitting in my apartment in Hamburg.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, I'm going back to the piano. So Yeah, I found a teacher, and within a year, I was working on the piano again. That didn't work out with her. I went to another teacher here in Hamburg. I can mention his name because he really brought me a long, long way, Matthias Veit. And yeah, the piano became an inspiration, and it never really replaced the horn because the horn had this sound that is, how do you say in English? Einmalig. It's only...
Peculiar.
It's unusual. It's unusual, and it's very unusual.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like it. And as I said, the trombone is similar, but it's just not the same. So.
And there is a little bit of a different dynamic, I think, because okay, we are comparing here the instruments, but there's also the fact that I think that you are alone while playing the
piano.
The piano.
Yeah, so this is a big thing. Of course, I haven't brought into the fact here that I sang for many years too, because I got into singing because I had a facial paralysis in the opera house after I'd started 2 or 3 years later. So in order to get rid of the facial paralysis, a result of tonsillitis, I started taking voice lessons, and after a couple of years, I realized I had a really good voice. At least I thought I did. And so, it's your own opinion, right?
Yeah.
And then I went to 2 or 3. Well, the first one was maybe too long, 8.5 years, and then I went on and worked with a singer who was very well known in Hamburg, and then eventually a former singer from the opera house who was a professor in Hamburg. Gisela Litz, she just died a couple years ago at the age of 101. So she was a fine teacher, and so I really got up there. I actually auditioned for the Hamburg Opera at the age of 49 for the opera, and the head conductor thought I was a lot younger, but he said, well, if you were 38 and I were still in Lübeck, I would hire you on the spot. But you're older, and he said, I'm now in Hamburg, so it's too late. So, I still continued singing. And the funny thing is with the horn and the singing use to a certain point the same technique, but after a certain point, because they both you have to breathe and you have to use your diaphragm, but it's a matter of how you support the sound, and that's where the difference comes in. And since I was playing heavy operas and I'd already been playing for years, the horn for years, I had a very, very strong body and a lot of support from my diaphragm. So I was literally pushing the air out of my mouth through my vocal cords. Well, when you sing, you don't want to push air out of your vocal cords. You actually swallow air. You pull it back into your body. It sounds crazy, but that's the way a voice teacher would suggest. So instead of the Italians have a saying, inhalata la voce. You inhale your voice. And so you breathe in, and then while you're letting the air out, you have the feeling you're pulling the air back. So you don't, and with the horn, you're pushing it out. You want it in the high range, you want it to go fast. You can't do that when you sing, because if you do, you're pressing on your vocal cords, and you get hoarse, you're destroying your voice. So, yeah, but anyway, so after I stopped the horn, I actually continued singing, and I had I had a finished voice a few years later. But yeah, I was already getting old, so I literally stopped singing. Gisela Litz went into what do you call it? It was not only assisted living. She was then older. She was in her 90s, and she could actually sing still, which showed me it's possible. Yeah, but I had a wobbly voice already. So anyway, I just stopped practicing. But I had started the piano. I had taken the piano out of the closet, as you might say in English.
Yeah.
Because I had a grand piano here for years, but I bought then a new Yamaha in '99. So when I gave up the horn, I continued on my Yamaha here, and I was very happy, and then had excellent teachers. So then I decided I wanted to play the piano. But as you say, the piano is a solo instrument, just like singing. So when you're standing in front of an audience singing, you have the expression, you have to let your pants down. That's what they say in German. You have to let your pants down.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you have to be able to show yourself, you could say physically, but mentally, you have to open up emotionally in front of the audience. Now, for a person like me who's been sitting in an orchestra for years, in a setting, this is difficult. The horn can always be heard, always. So if you know what a horn sounds like, and even if you're listening to a Wagner opera with, we used to have 104 in the orchestra for a Wagner opera. That's a lot of people. But you could still hear, if you knew what you were listening to, you could hear, and I played third horn then, that's a higher part. When you played a Wagner opera, you could hear the solos in the first horn and the third horn. You could hear all the duets with the first and second horn.
And how many horns in total then?
Well, in a Wagner opera, you'd have 4. You'd have 4 tuba. Not in all of them, but in Rheingold, there's only 4 horns. But when you get into the bigger operas, you've got 4 horns and 4 tubas. Same thing in Strauss. So if you really have a developed ear, you can hear the horn players at all times. So that means if you're going to play a Mozart opera, and I played a lot of Mozart operas on second horn, or in Basel and Stuttgart on first horn, then you're going to hear every little mistake that's made. And this is where horn players start getting really edgy. So my nerves were not as good as, let's say, most first horn players. So you better make sure you're a really good hornist to be able to handle the nerve situation, okay?
Okay.
And I've been on tour in Japan playing Così fan tutte, and I have to brag that it went very, very, very well. 8 performances and perfect. So, but Così fan tutte is really difficult on first and second horn. So, but it's still, in an orchestral setting, you've still got all these people around you, and it is supportive to a point. You're not on the stage by yourself. When you're going to sing a concert with a pianist, the pianist is on the side, but you're standing in front. You have to produce the goods.
Yeah.
And you have to relax and let go. So it's a matter of letting go. That's what it comes down to. And on the piano, it's very similar. You are by yourself, but there's nobody else there. So when you start a piece, you have to make sure you know the piece, and most of the time you're playing it from memory. You have to get through it. I mean, if you're accompanying a singer, and I've done some accompanying also, in school, right, since professionally I've just worked with people, but I haven't done any performances live. So if you are performing as a soloist, you better make sure you know your piece. You better make sure you can get through it.
Okay. And prior to that, did you suffer a little bit from stage fright in the orchestra? And
oh, yeah.
And what did you do about it back then?
Well, the hardest operas, I guess you can't generalize, but I mean, for me, some of the hardest operas were the operas where you start with a horn or horns by themselves. Like Don Carlos, 4 horns. And all written in different keys, by the way. So that means nobody plays the notes that are written. You're playing either 4 notes up or 4 notes down or 5 notes up. Everyone is in a different position. You can imagine what the conductor goes through if he stops the horn section and said, oh yeah, second horn, you made this and this mistake. He's got to know the score. He's got to know what they're playing and what key they're playing in, because they're all transposing. I mean, this is not easy for the conductor. But the horn players know they are starting the opera. They better make sure that they can pull it off. And if you're going to start Fidelio, again, you're starting with 2 horns, and it's completely open. You better make sure you're in tune. You can start it without missing the first note. And if you do, I mean, it's funny, all the performances I've ever played, nobody missed anything at the beginning, but it's always possible. And since it's always possible, and you never can guarantee the first note that comes out, it's a nerve thing, I've spent a lot of sleepless nights before performances,
And what about the practice? I mean, I think quite sure an orchestra has to practice. Was this for you enough practice, or because you're not the one to decide, but most probably this would be the director then of the...
Yeah, well, he knows right away. But conductor hears everything. Well, no, I can't generalize.
Okay.
Most conductors can hear it. So let's put it this way. If you're a horn player, you better make sure you can play your part. And I remember playing Orchestral, and I was playing the Wagner tuba. And yeah, there are some pretty technical things on the tuba. And I was playing first F tuba. There's 4 tuba, and they play in different keys. I was playing F tuba, Simone Young's conducting, and I admired her. She was a fine conductor, one of the few female conductors in the world. She's Australian. And there was a passage in there with, for the F tubas, 2 F tubas, and it was unison, and it was chromatic. So, like if you're on, I have a piano right here.
Yeah.
And it's down in the low range, but... And you're playing something like that fast on the tuba, you better make sure you've got good technique in your fingers and you can play these notes clean, because otherwise it's going to sound like... It's going to sound like chewing gum.
Yeah.
And I had trouble with that part. Everyone has trouble with that part. She went right to it. She said, okay, play it for us. And we had a substitute on the second tuba from Munich, a really fine tuba player. He was having trouble with his tuba. He was fixing his tuba, and I had to play it alone, and I messed it up. So she just looked at me and says, I'm sorry, but that is completely unacceptable. And I felt really embarrassed because I thought I had a really good relationship with her. And then I realized, okay, Dorothy, you better practice it. So I pulled it off in the performance, and the second tuba player was really a fine technician. And so, it went over okay. But, I mean, you better make sure when you play that instrument, the tuba or the horn, that you can play your part. You can't mess around. You're not in the violin section. I mean, you've got 16 first violins, and they're playing, most of the time, 16. And if one person messes up, yes, you know that there's something wrong there, but you don't know who it is. But if you've got 4 horn players, everyone's playing a different part, then something was wrong there. We used to get letters from the audience. I mean, I shouldn't say this, but I mean, somebody makes a mistake. Maybe most people won't know who it is. People in the orchestra will know because they have ears.
Yeah. Okay.
And the conductor very often knows. They might not say anything to you, but they know. They're thankful, of course, that you're there, that you can play the part.
Yeah.
But you've got a responsibility, and you get a job like this. In the States, they say, well, in German orchestras, you cannot be fired. No, that's a lie. I've been fired also because of other reasons. But no, you can be fired. But the thing is, basically, if you've got a problem, you're working in a team.
Yeah.
So, we have to see we really worked together, always. So if somebody had trouble with a high note, there's always somebody else that can help you, in most cases, okay? If it's the first and second horn playing it together, the first horn will say very often, leave it off. It doesn't matter because he knows he's going to get it. And 99% of the time he does. So yeah, that's the first thing, is the second horn gets dropped out. I was always proud of the fact that I could play 99% perfect with the first horn player. So I didn't worry about it. But sometimes the conductor doesn't know who messed it up. He doesn't know in rehearsal. But you work together. And you have places where you're playing a Tchaikovsky ballet or a Tchaikovsky symphony, and there's no time to breathe. You're just playing and playing and playing. It can go on for 25 minutes, 30 minutes. It's really strenuous. It's hard on your facial muscles. You get physically tired, but you have to go on. You have to. So it's like you can't do this when you play soccer. But you can always kick the ball to the other side of the field, right?
Yeah.
So we do something similar. So you're playing a Tchaikovsky ballet, and the first horn player is getting tired. So he'll just, he'll tell you usually, or you pick it up immediately. He just left out 2 bars. He left them out. Yeah, because he's getting tired. He knows there's a harder part coming up, so he lets his face have a rest for maybe 5 seconds or 10 seconds, and so you automatically take over. All kinds of things have happened. The first horn player once turned 2 pages instead of 1. On the next page, he had a big solo. And I knew he'd done it wrong, so I just played it. It's just, for me, it was taken for granted. A lot of people would not have done it, but I always did it. You have to. You're covering each other,
Okay.
Somebody has a problem, you take it over.
Yeah.
And I can't even tell you some of the things that I've done because it would make maybe players look bad. But, the fact is you're working in a team, and no one is perfect. And when you're playing big operas, people get tired. Or I've talked about this before. I'm playing at La Traviata, and my valve starts sticking, my third valve on the horn, and I was sitting on third horn, and I had an older man playing fourth who had a lot of experience, and after I played a few pages, I said, my third valve is sticking, what am I going to do? And he said, oh, wait a minute, was it the third or the second? I forgot now, but you have what you call alternative fingerings. There's another way to play a note very often, very, very often. So I used the alternate fingerings until it didn't work anymore because there were notes that I couldn't play on the alternate fingering. So I said to my colleague, Richard, I can't go on. This isn't going to work. So he handed me his horn, and he proceeded to fix mine because it was stuck. That means he had to get his oil out, and he did. It took him about 3 minutes, 5 minutes. So in that time, he didn't play, but I had his horn in my hand. The problem is, Germans and Americans, this kind of sounds crazy now because it gets very complicated, but when you play a French horn, you usually play a double horn, which means the horn is based in 2 keys. It's based in the key of F, which is the horn key, and it's based in the key of B flat. So it's either going up a fourth or going down.
So that was different then.
And the thumb valve connects the 2 horns together, and he had threaded the horn, as we would say, instead of connect, so that the basic horn was in F, the basic horn was in B flat. So I had to think, oh my goodness, so when I play this note, what do I do with the thumb valve? I was going crazy. Yeah, but these things can happen. And thank God, after a few minutes, he fixed it, and then it went on and everything was fine. But that's teamwork, and these things happen.
Okay, I see. Yeah. So you don't have this advantage in the piano?
No, very good. No, you don't have this. And I'm working with a new teacher now from Vancouver, Canada. His name is Lee Kum Singh. He's Indonesian.
Okay.
And we talked about a recent performance of mine. I gave a concert on the 8th of June, 2024. And there was another problem that developed. I don't want to go into it now, but it kind of threw me off. And I started playing a Schubert impromptu, which isn't easy. And at the very beginning, I realized because this situation that had developed had kind of made me forget stuff. And then I told the audience, I'm sorry, I'm going to use the music. Now, that's embarrassing for me because I memorize everything. There happened to be a singer sitting behind me in the first row, and I asked her if she would turn pages. So I took the music, and she turned pages. So I told this to my teacher now.
Yeah.
And he was actually mad. And he said, yes, but it's so easy. All you have to do is when you practice, learn how to jump from one place to another so that if you forget something, you just jump over it and go to another place. Well, I'd never heard of that before. That was new for me.
Okay.
And I never practiced like that before. So now I'm starting to do that. And he's giving me all kinds of tricks that you do. Because he was a concert pianist all of his life. He's now in his 80s. So, people who have been around know the tricks. And there are a lot of tricks. But you're right. Once you start as a soloist, you better make sure you know how to get through it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
things can also happen, it hasn't happened to me yet, but, the pedal could stick. You could have keys that could stick. That's happened years ago in the States once. And when the key sticks, well, I don't know. You could pay the passage maybe an octave higher. I don't know. But, you have to be prepared for anything to happen. Anything's possible.
And what about the fun? Which instrument is more fun to play?
That I don't know if I can answer that, because I love playing in an orchestra because it's a social atmosphere and you got all these people around you.
Yeah.
And I've played in Bayreuth. I was the first female horn player to play in Bayreuth in the 70s, and I'm very proud of that. And that was that an experience. And we used to have fun. We really enjoyed it. But it was because you're in this social atmosphere and you're all working together. And when you play the piano, you're all by yourself. So you don't have that. You have the fun because you like the composer. So now I'm working on a lot of stuff with Schubert and Schumann and easy things. And I remember 2 of my teachers have said, Schubert, you have to have fun with Schubert. Schubert, he was, you have to be frivolous. And that's a whole different thing, which I never got into in the horn, because you're in a collective. Like I said, is that what you say in English? Collective?
I think so.
And so
Sounds
when
good
you're a
to me.
pianist, but you've got the composer. And the composer, if you're supposed to do something that's very light and happy, then all you have to do is know what he wanted to express here, and you express it, Or I'm
Okay.
working on dances.
Yeah.
People laugh at this, but I'm working on Ländler, which is a dance performed in Bayern and in Austria, like 100 years ago, and they clap their shoes and dance around there, and it's very light. And actually, I never played anything like this before, but this teacher suggested I buy this stuff and work on it. So I've been working on it for a few months. Yeah, and it's a whole different world. So he's explaining to me, and this is a whole thing with the piano that you don't have with the horn. The conductor can give you specific feeling, or with his radiance expressing what he wants the orchestra to do. I saw that the other day with a performance with Abato, who died, I think 2019. And it was an old performance with the Bayerische Rundfunk. And he was talking to them, and they were explaining, different members of the orchestra, how they would play this like for the first time. And then he would just explain a couple of things, but he did it with his whole body and with his person, his person, showing what did he want, what did he expect from the orchestra, what were you going to give him, what could he, Carl Böhm could do this, I've heard it from other great conductors, whom I've worked with, how they express it with their body. I mean, it's crazy because people don't understand this, I mean, the way you sit at a desk, and hold your pen is the way you're going to write, right?
Yeah.
So, if you're relaxed at the piano, you know how 2 people would dance a Ländler, which means a dance from the land, right? I guess you'd say it's called like that. You know how it would be danced, and or a waltz, you're playing a waltz, and you know what 2 people, how they react to each other in a waltz, and that it's a 3-step, or a Ländler's a 3-step, and one person will guide the other one backwards, or the other one guides you forward or backwards. So you get this give and take, so that when you're playing the Ländler, it's not the music that you're playing that's the focus, but the music is like an accompaniment to the dancer. Now, I've never ever done anything like this before. This is all new to me. And my last teacher used to say the same thing with Chopin waltzes. You have to think of when you're waltzing or you're on the stage and you're throwing this woman up into the air, then that's the high point of the phrase. So you think about all these things, and boy, that really changes the whole piece. So, in a collective, it's a different situation. You're limited as to how much you can do, and you're limited inside your section because you've got a first horn player, and he's got most of the solos. Of course, there's solos in the other parts too, and there are famous fourth horn solos also. And then you're on your own. But when you're in this situation where you're let's say you're playing a waltz,
Yeah.
and there's plenty of waltzes, Strauss waltzes for orchestra. Well, you're playing horn, you're going to get the afterbeats. But. So you have to know how to play a waltz. And so it's exactly the same thing. So you've got a tuba player and a string bass player, and they're going to get the first beat, and the horns get the afterbeats. Well, you better make sure you know how to do it. Most orchestra musicians, once they land in a good orchestra, they know all this stuff. This is all rudimentary. So yeah, you've got to learn, and the same thing on the piano. So I played waltzes as a child, but I was a beginner. So when you're a beginner, you don't know how to play this stuff. You've got to spend years working on yourself, learning about composers, learning about the music. What was the composer trying to get across to you? Was he trying to say? And then you play it accordingly.
Okay.
And a singer has exactly that. With a singer, it goes even further.
Yeah. And would you say that you are a perfectionist?
Oh. Yeah, unfortunately, I have to say that. It makes it very difficult. I used to brag about being a perfectionist on the horn, and I always told people I bring 99%. You know what? That got me into a lot of trouble and a lot of sleepless nights because no one plays the horn perfect. You should know that.
Okay.
No one.
Okay.
And I can mention names here. I won't do it, but of horn players who for me were like the greatest horn players. And I'll never forget one concert. I won't mention the name, and I won't mention the orchestra. It was a great orchestra in Europe. And the solo horn player told me before the concert, we've got one passage, one note in here. It's an entrance on a horn F sharp, which would be a B, which is on the horn high, piano, soft. And he said, it's risky. It's the any note that I really worry about. Well, you know what? When he came to that note, he played in a cacciatura. He screwed it up. He played
Yeah.
because he aimed it higher, and so he played a very nice note next to it. So he missed the note, and of course he felt embarrassed. He felt horrible, and he's playing under a great conductor. And his sister, I was sitting with his sister in the audience behind the orchestra, and I told her, I said, you know what? When he comes up to us later, he's going to be furious. She said, what are you talking about? I said, he missed a note, and he's a perfectionist, so he's going to be mad at himself. And you watch. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. He was furious. And he asked me later, he said, could anyone hear it? And I said, well, of course, but no one knew if they didn't know the symphony. I think it was a Haydn symphony. They didn't know that they thought it was in a cacciatura, a grace note that came before the F sharp,
Okay.
But he was a perfectionist. So in those days, I had a lot of sleepless nights wondering, how am I going to play this symphony or that or this opera, Mozart opera, because it's so difficult. And someone suggested to me, because I said I want to bring 100%. I always said 99, and so this lady said, "Well, what is?" In German, you use the word machbar. How would you translate that?
Doable.
What is practical? What is practical? Nothing is 100%, and no hornist can play perfect, because the instrument is not perfect. It has to do with the instrument, because the overtone series, which is like basically 60 notes, is out of tune. And so therefore the horn is out of tune. It all starts with this.
Yeah.
Whether it's a horn or a trombone or a tuba, the instruments are out of tune.
Okay.
It's your job with the fingerings and your embouchure and your hand to get it in tune as easy as possible. Okay? So on the piano, you have, the notes are already all there. You've got other problems. Or with the voice, you've got other problems. I won't even go into the voice now because that's even more complicated. But with the piano, you have a lot of notes and you're playing, let's just say a simple Chopin waltz. Yeah, it's not that easy, and your right hand's moving all over the piano, and or you're playing a Chopin etude, which is much, much more difficult. And as my last teacher said, you don't worry about the notes. You make sure your arms are moving. And it's like, it's almost an accident to get the notes to fall in the right places. But they do. If you do everything and you're relaxed and you're like kind of swaying your arms, yeah, everything's going to come out 99%. So what I decided is I'm not going to go for 99% anymore. I'm going to go for 85%. So that became for me, I think I'm always thinking in German, a credible, what's the word? Maßstab. It's pretty bad when you can't speak your own language.
Yeah, like your default.
I don't even know. I can't think right now what it would be, but a possibility. Let's put it this way: 85% is machbar. So okay, got 85%. So the funny thing is, what happened? Because we're living in a society in Germany where everything has to be perfect if it's possible, and nothing can be perfect. That's the whole point. And that's what this lady said to me. Nothing can be perfect.
That's
and I know with the Asians,
point,
that's a big thing with Asians because they always try to be perfect too. And I've had Asian piano students, and I said, look, it's impossible to play perfect. Why don't you find a credible percentage of what you're going to strive for? So at that point with my... we're talking here about the horn. They're going back here 20, 30 years ago. And so I set it at 85. Well, you know what the funny thing is? I was much more relaxed and I could sleep nice because I thought I only have to bring 85%. And what happens is then you're more relaxed.
Yeah.
You don't worry about it. You don't say, okay, before I tack the note, I've got to get this first note. I've got to play this perfect. You let go a little bit. And by letting go, you achieve 99%.
Yeah.
That's the joke.
You get into the flow.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's just like with the piano, you're playing a Chopin etude and you just let your arms swing and you do get 99% of the notes. So it's all in your mind.
Yeah.
So it comes down to. And you had asked a question before which I didn't answer. What do I do if I got something really difficult in the opera and how do I
dealt with it?
How do I deal with it?
Yeah.
Well, this was just one of the answers. You set lower standards, and it doesn't mean you're going to drop your your standard. You really don't drop it. You make it easier for yourself. But there were all kinds of other things that I have done in the past. People who know me know about this. I've been doing sports for years and years and years since I was a child, since I got into this crazy profession.
What kind of sport?
Well, I started jogging, and I jogged for 12 years until I had back problems. And then a chiropractor said, because I had horrible problems with my back, he said, you should not be jogging, you should swim. So from one day to the next, I started swimming. It took me 2 weeks to be able to get back and forth across the pool. And then for years and years and years, I did my 1,000 meters. So that was normal. And now we had COVID. So with COVID, I couldn't go swimming, and that was talking about 3 years here. I was in the States a couple times, and there I could swim. There was no one in the pool, so I went swimming. But in Germany, no, it wasn't possible. So okay, now I'm back to the pool twice a week, but I got into basic yoga exercises, anything to keep your body, all parts of your body in shape. I ride a bicycle as much as possible. The car's in the garage now most of the time because gasoline is so expensive. But you know what? It's good for your body to ride a bike. It's good for your legs, good for your circulation system, it's good for your heart.
Yeah.
And with the horn, you better make sure you're in pretty good shape to play the horn. You need a good support. But before performance, I had all kinds of things I started doing that other people might not even know about. I started meditating. I've been meditating for years and years and years. And that is the basic solution for me because it calms your mind. And if you do it over many years, you actually become a quieter person. You get rid of, it's a stress reducer, very simple.
Yeah.
And you not only reduce the stress from now, you reduce it from yesterday and last year and 5 years ago and 10 years ago, and you go back to your childhood and. Okay? So that's number one. And I would recommend that to anybody, but most people will not take the chance or don't want to spend the time. There's all kinds of other things. There's NLP. I did that for a couple of years. There's I also did Scientology. I have to admit it. I stopped it, but I did it.
One question, and these Scientology guys, they were normally there after the money, isn't it? So.
Well, yeah, I worked with someone for the orchestra who did Scientology, and he didn't charge me anything. And we worked for 2 years, and it was very successful. He really reduced a lot of my stress.
So Scientology has got their own kind of meditation programs or tactics?
Well, Scientology is a system. I don't know how I'd say it. It's a system. I found out later, because I did TM, Transcendental Meditation, that the rudimentary aspects of meditation, TM, was very simple to Scientology. I found that out after I was doing Scientology for a year or so.
Yeah.
And this was a colleague of mine. But you also have in Scientology called the free zone. And these are the people who either had left Hubbard and the movement, which was very expensive. These guys were selling their houses, everything they had, to go on with Scientology, because the first course was maybe 200 marks or dollars, and then it would jump up to 1,000 or 2,000, and then it was 10,000. So they were selling everything they had, or doing all kinds of other jobs, side jobs, to be able to pay for their Scientology courses. And I saw this, and it really turned me off. But this colleague of mine was also in the free zone, so to say. And I had gone to Munich. I had worked with his auditor, as they called him, and I was very thankful that I did that. I have nothing against it. But where I do put meditation, any kind of meditation, over Scientology, is that it really develops your heart, how you feel about yourself, how you feel about other people. It's another level, okay?
Okay.
And this Scientology whom I worked with for 2 years just turned 85, and I called him on his birthday 2 weeks ago, and he was asking me how I am, and I said, yeah. And he said, are you still meditating? Yes. I've been meditating now for years and years and years. And he says, is it really good? And I said, oh, yes, definitely. So I think he was surprised, because he would have probably been very happy 40 years ago if I had stopped meditating and just done Scientology. But I didn't, okay? So I left the Scientology after 2 years. And as I say, there's all kinds of techniques out there. All you have to do is want to do it. There's autogenous training. I did that a little bit. I what do you call, snoopered around in it. I mean, there's, everything's out there. You can read a lot. What I used to do is write letters to myself, which I still do.
Like the morning pages, no?
The morning pages, right, which I do in the middle of the night if I can't sleep. And just write down your thoughts. And by writing them down, you're getting your feelings out. Because that's the problem. You can't sleep because you have so much stuff in your mind and so many anxieties. Yes, but once you get a piece of paper, of course you got to put a light on and get out of bed. So you start writing how you feel. And by writing it, you're solving the problem in many cases, you know?
Yeah.
And so, well, I've done that now for 20 years. And I did that when my mother was dying. A meditation teacher suggested to me, because I didn't know how to get over this loss. And he said, okay, I'm going to suggest to you, before you go to bed at night, sit down and just start writing. And I did, and it changed my life.
Which loss?
The loss of my mother.
It's
20,
okay.
21 years ago, okay? So, yeah. It was a very difficult relationship. Yeah, but it was still a hole in my life, you know? And she was in the States, and I'm here in Germany. So, but I started writing, and I realized, wow, once I've written for half an hour or an hour, I can sleep. This is a new experience, a new discovery. And so I've got a pile of stuff. So a lot of therapists will say, did you burn it? No, I never burned them. I kept them. Well, technically I could write books now because, and the thing is, when you write during the middle of the night, you are writing at a time where most people are sleeping. The world, everything's at a different layer of consciousness. You can think things, and very often I write in German. And the next day, when I look at what I've written, I thought, did I really write that? I can't believe that I could have perceived so deeply into my own soul.
Yeah.
And so that's something I can really recommend to people, especially if you're a performer. And another thing, of course, is before you go out on stage, especially if you're by yourself, I do a little bit of meditation, or I do some yoga exercises, or you can punch a ball. There's all kinds of things you can do. Breathing, concentrating on your breathing, right? That's one of the best things. Concentrate on your breathing. And there's a thing, it comes from a Eastern philosophy called, if you see now, I read the book in German, the big circulatory system. So you've got the big circulatory system and the small circulatory system. And it's just a breathing thing where you concentrate on the breathing from the first chakra up to your last chakra, and then it circulates. And then after you do that 8 times, then you make a ring around your belly button.
Yeah.
36 times in clockwise. Is clockwise? Yeah. And then you do it in the opposite direction 24 times. And after that, you're very quiet. And you know what? I used to do this when the lights went down before a very difficult opera, especially Mozart or something difficult. And I had about 2 minutes because the lights went down in the pit, and something was going on the stage. No one knew what. And so for these 2 minutes, I would do this exercise. No one knows I did it, but I felt calm.
And what can I ask you, what are the most difficult operas, and what are the most easiest ones?
Oh, that depends on all kinds of factors. It depends on your instrument, depends on the conductor, what the composer wanted, you talk about Mozart. I'm working on some very easy Schumann things now that may look easy, but you know what? The less notes you have on the page, the more difficult it is, because on the piano, you've only got one line in each hand. So that means everything depends on how you strike the key, how you approach the piano, how you're sitting, how well you know the composer. What are you going to do with the music? That's going to happen in your mind. And if your heart is with your mind, that's the whole object of life, is to get your mind and body and your mind and your heart unified. Because if you're in that state, then you approach everything differently. No, there's just people, If you're just thinking from your head, then you're going to have a very different relationship with someone than if your heart is involved and you can think, well, I'm going to cook for this person. I wonder if he likes to eat this or he likes to eat that. Rather than you just say, okay, I'm making this tomorrow and you're going to eat it whether you like it or
not. Okay. Yeah.
So that's the thing. So with the opera, I have my favorite composers, and I have things for me. Mozart was really, really difficult because it had to be perfect. And again, I'm approaching this 99%. When I started giving up on that, thinking, okay, if I get 85%, it's good. Yeah, and then you don't know who you're working with. You make sure you have a good relationship with the person, your colleague whom you're working with. If you're sitting in the first violin section and you need a meter for your bow and the person next to you can't handle that because you're taking up too much room, you're going to have a problem.
Oh, yeah.
Or you want more room for your chair and they don't want to give it to you, and you're going to bow in their face and they don't want you near them. You've already got a problem, So there's all kinds of things that come into this. And horn players, for example, have to hear themselves. The basic way to hear themselves, I mean, there are places like the Berlin Philharmonic, or here, the new Elfi in the harbor, which are problems for musicians because there's no back wall. Okay, I've played in the Berlin Philharmonic, in the orchestra in the Berlin Philharmonic, also with our orchestra in Berlin, and there's no back wall. You're in a garden. It's called a garden arena. So there's a wall that goes up, but it's not right behind you. So the horn needs a wall behind the instrument because you're actually hearing what's bouncing off the back and not what you're playing.
Okay.
Now with singing, it's different because with singing, you are projecting it. You don't want to wait to hear yourself. Yes, it helps. Of course, you're in a hall and you can hear it coming back off the back wall of in the hall. But in most cases that's not possible because the halls are too big. If there's 1,000 people in the hall, you're not going to hear yourself. You have to just kind of assume that your technique is stable enough that you're letting your voice go, you're projecting your voice, and everything is going to happen okay. Okay? So if the hornist doesn't have anything in back of him, it's going to be hard to hear. And let's say you're playing a Mozart opera.
Yeah.
And assuming you get along with your colleague, and let's say the back wall is right back. Well, I had a situation in Hamburg here where the crew put up. It was according to the person who'd written the opera, the regisseur. What do you call that? No, it wasn't. I don't know.
Director.
The director, but I'm not sure if he decided this. They wanted a diagonal wall in back of the orchestra on the left side, and the horn set on the left side. So they put this wall up. Oh, it was horrible. I went in the pit. I couldn't, because it was like, it was like playing, let's say, 10 inches away from the wall with your bell to the wall, and there was no room for the sound to develop.
Yeah.
So the conductor, Albrecht at the time, this is in the 80s, and he looked over at us, and I was complaining. The first horn player didn't say anything. And I said to one of my other colleagues, I said, I'm sorry, but this is a ridiculous situation. I can't hear myself. And so Albrecht and I got along very well, the conductor, and he said, Horns, what's the problem? And I said, I'm sorry, but this is a very difficult station. He said, take it out. And they took it out. They took that wall out right away. It changed. Everything was fine.
Okay.
But of course, in most situations, nobody will say anything. They're afraid to open their mouths. They don't want to get sat on or people to talk about them. Well, I was outspoken, so I opened my mouth. And one of my good horn colleagues also used to open his mouth and say what he thought. So that's how you get results. And that's true in life, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
To a point.
And have you always been like this, outspoken, quite with this self-confidence?
Well, I have to. Germany uses the word "jein." I mean, I talked a lot in the States, and but people don't believe it now. I actually had a lot of trouble saying things or talking to people because I was just afraid. I was really afraid to talk to people. And once I got the knack, it's a long time ago, through this meditation to realize, well, there's no reason why I can't say something. Yeah. It took me years. It took me, I don't know, I was probably in my 40s before I could say something. And once I did, as a friend of mine says now, it's a waterfall now. So I can't shut up. And so,
okay.
So when somebody asks me something, I don't stop. But this is true of a lot of people. And we're brought up, this is a society here, especially in Germany. I mean, I don't want to make it negative now, but people think about everything they want to say before they say it.
Political wokeness, political correctness.
It can be dangerous because there may be a possibility there to be the word, we talked about this before, assertive. And the word assertive is not really in the dictionary. What did you say before? What they say they use for that?
Assertive in German, durchsetzungsfähig, I think.
Durchsetzungsfähig. In other words, enabled to do what you want to do. So that is kind of frowned upon in Germany because you're supposed to go along with the crowd, or you have to listen to everybody first and then see what, very democratic, and think what everyone has to say, and then maybe after a long period of time, it might be half an hour or 2 hours, then you might say something. The problem with that is there may have been an offer there. Let's say we're talking business,
Yeah.
and there may be an offer for your company to snap a big deal.
Yeah.
And you don't open your mouth because you say, well, maybe so-and-so's against it or he's against it. You don't say it. But another company would take it right away. So
Absolutely.
you know what? You've just lost the deal.
Yeah.
And that's maybe a big difference between Germans and Americans. A friend of mine who lived right near here worked for an American company. And he told me, I said, how do you like working for an American company?
Yeah.
He said, well, the one thing is I can really hand it to the Americans. They see something, how they can change something. I think about sometimes repairing streets. And in the States, when a street has to be asphalted, it might be a block long. They do it in about, at the most, a week. It's done,
Yeah.
And if the thing is, so then he talked about this with a company, and they had to discuss something to change something. So he says, so they took about 2 weeks, and they initiated it right away to do it. He said, and I said, okay, what about problems? He said, yeah, and then some problems came up, and some things didn't get done. So he says, so they just changed their direction, and they corrected it, and they went on.
Yeah.
He said, but in Germany, he says, no, it wouldn't work like that here because they have to think it all out from A to Z. And they were working with an American company, so they spent 2 years developing something. And by the time it was developed, the idea was taken by another company. So they lost the deal, you see? So
that sounds common, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, people don't believe this now, but I've spent years trying to learn how to talk and trying to open my mouth at all. I was afraid. In the orchestra, it was the same situation. I used to not say anything because I was afraid, it's embarrassing for me to say anything. We're in a collective here. Yeah, and now it's a completely different. Now I say maybe too much. Same thing with my organization, on my foundation. So I have to be careful. I don't say it too early because they have to be ready to accept it. That's the other thing. So they have to think it through. And then maybe it's after it's all thought through, then I'll say, well, why don't we do this? And then, of course, it has to be thought out. Well, is that a possibility? Can that be realized? What would you have to do to get there? It has to be all thought out first, and then maybe they'll do it, maybe they won't. But I still think you have to open your mouth.
Yeah.
You must open your mouth.
And I think it gives yourself also a kind of fulfillment.
Yeah. Yeah, and it makes you feel like you're worth something, And I think you learn a lot by doing this, because you also learn yourself. Like as I've said, I learned, okay, I said that too early. I should have waited maybe half an hour with like 5 or 6 people before I said anything. But if you wait too long,
yeah,
it happened twice recently with meetings that I had.
Okay.
I waited and waited.
Yeah.
And then 2 other people said what I wanted to say. So I thought, so why didn't you say it earlier?
Yeah. And we got these impulses, but when the mind or the logic kicks in, then we think, oh no, that's doubt for me. And in some situation, doubt kills. Doubt.
So I don't know how we got into all this. Just completely off the subject.
But I think it was.
But it all fits in somehow.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, brilliant, Dorothy. I think let's wrap it up. I think even that the last part was really, really entertaining.
Yeah. You never asked me the big question, what do I like, the solo playing better or the orchestra playing? I like the orchestra playing. But you know what? I'm so happy I went to the piano because I don't need an orchestra now to perform. I can play, I also have an A piano, an electric piano. I can play any time of the day or night on my E piano, and I have specific times when I practice on my grand piano. And I am so happy that I went back to the piano because I can fulfill myself with music now. And all of my colleagues in the orchestra, well, most of them, the string players play until they get around 80, and then eventually they all stop. So I'm the only one. Yes, I have a colleague who's also playing. He plays in a Jagdchor. Yeah. How do you say that in English?
Like a choir for hunters or something like this?
A hunting corps.
Okay.
So they all play little...
That's horn playing, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's not a French horn. It's a Jagdhorn, right?
Yeah.
And so he's still doing that. He's in his 70s, you know. He still does that, and he likes training his group. So that's great. But otherwise, I don't know anyone still performing. They have all given up. You've got wonderful pianists out there. You've got Margaret Ageris at the beginning of her 80s, and she's really pulling her weight. She's doing a wonderful job. Yeah, but these are big exceptions. Why are other people out there still performing? Why not?
And what's your next project then? Because the other day you played in a church in Hamburg.
Well, I mean, it was a concert it had just happened to be in a church, because this person had sold the piano to the church. So that was his piano from his company, and I had the opportunity to perform there. Now I do some composing on the side, and I have a piece that I wrote for. It's a peace song. It's called "Smile for a While." And I wrote it because my foundation is involved in reconciliation and world peace. And I wrote it for that reason, to see if people are smiling all the time, then they're not going to want to make war, right? So I have an opera singer. I don't know if I should mention a name now because he hasn't said yes yet. He's working in Holland, and he had one rehearsal with me, but he has to really decide he's going to do this. And he's Syrian, and it's done in English. So he has, and it's a little bit not classical. It's a little bit, how would you say, pop-mäßig. A little. It's entertainment, you know. But the text is good, and it gets people to think. Why don't we stop all these wars? Why don't we just be happy with each other and forgive each other?
What an
and the
awesome
term is,
idea.
Yeah, and the term is reach out. It's in there. Reach out and touch someone's heart. I mean, this is where it's at. Where are we today? What's wrong with the world? Why are people isolated? Why don't they reach out to their neighbor? Why don't they talk to their neighbors next door? What's the problem?
Have you reached many hearts in your
Yes,
life, Dorothy?
I've reached a lot of hearts. And you can do it through your music. The music's number one. But again, if you don't have your heart in your music and you're just playing with your head, you can't achieve this. It's not possible.
Okay.
I knew a hornist once. He was a fine horn player, I could say. He made all the notes. But he told me, I was still studying at Manhattan School of Music, and he already had a job. And he said, I don't want to think about playing the horn. I just want to play. I mean, in other words, he didn't want to play musically. He just wanted to play the notes. And what happens is you end up playing like a robot. Okay? Because you can do that. You can play every note. You can do it exactly like that. But as far as I'm concerned, you're a robot. There's no heart in it. There's no warmth in it. And he was a warm person, but he was convinced when you play the horn, you just think notes. And you do that on the piano. I mean, a lot of pianists play like that. But what's the point of making music if you have no soul behind it? If there's no emotion being conveyed, then what do you have? I mean, why do people go crazy over pop singers? Because these guys are speaking a text that really appeals to them, and it's appealing to the heart. So the women are all going crazy in the audience, jumping up and down. Yeah, because they're all being affected by the emotions of the singer. And that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So we have this theme. They in Germans have the term rote Faden. It's going through the entire society. It doesn't matter whether it's political or emotional music. We need more heart in our existence. And aren't people getting tired of fighting wars? I mean, what's going on here?
I think so. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, almost everyone I know, at least, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think for me, music is the answer. And as I wrote in the song, I hope you will be able to hear it soon on my YouTube station, Dorothy Habig at .com. Reach out and touch a heart, smile for a while, and wonderful things can happen. And I've even forgotten the text. I wrote it 2 years ago. So I'm really hoping this guy does it, and maybe you'll hear him. He has an incredible voice. And I think crossovers are great. It's wonderful to hear some of the great opera singers sing pop music, because all of that soul that's going into singing at the top of their lungs in opera, and they just put it into pop music. And without a microphone, because of the microphone, you don't need all of that power and the warmth coming from the body. You can just speak very quietly and you get an effect. Yes, but it's not as deep, it's not as moving as it is when you don't have a microphone. And all I have to do is think about opera singers. Why is it people can't stand opera singers? Yeah, because there's so much depth, there's so much emotion, and it's so intensive. I mean, I don't know if you have that with pop musicians. I don't know. I question it.
Okay.
Maybe a few.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
That was really brilliant, Dorothy. Thank you
As
so much.
you can see, I can't stop talking. Okay, tune in for the next time with Andreas.
Exactly.